Welcome to Discograffiti, the music podcast that delivers the objective truth about the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever existed. I'm Dave Gebrow.
And I'm Joe Kennedy.
And in this episode of Discograffiti, Joe?
Yeah, today we have a very special episode that's going to deviate a little bit from our regular format, and it melds with the format of one of our favorite podcasts.
That's right. Tonight, we bring you Sleep With Me, Discograffiti's most somniferous LPs, the first ever podcast about the greatest albums to fall asleep to that's designed to put you to sleep before the show reaches the end. Warning, this is designed to be listened to at night. Also, there will be no reviews for any of the records we talk about tonight. They're all great, just like the guest we've landed for you.
This show, we're intentionally going to try to put you to sleep, not accidentally like usual.
That's right. That's right. And this great guest we've landed for you, he is the creator and host of Sleep With Me, the one-of-a-kind bedtime story podcast featured in the New York Times, the New Yorker, CBS Sunday Morning, and Nova. Born out of his childhood insomnia, Sleep With Me was inspired by late-night comedy radio, which was the only thing that helped him fall asleep. Created back in 2013, Sleep With Me combines the pain of insomnia with the relief of laughing and turns it into a unique storytelling podcast. His stories on the show are inspired by his childhood as the oldest of 6 children and past jobs as a fuzzy dice and iron-on patch salesperson, fruit fly monitor for the state of California, and librarian for one of the largest jails in the country. Through Sleep With Me, this man has dedicated himself to help those who feel alone in the deep, dark night and just need someone to tell them a bedtime story, kind of like Freddy Krueger in reverse. Lads and ladies, way out in the yonder twilit reaches of Discograffiti City, will you please help me in welcoming to the hallowed halls of Discograffiti, Scooter, a.k.a. Scoots, a.k.a. Drew Ackerman.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I've never been associated with Freddy Krueger, but he's got. I hope I should have put on a comfy sweater like he wears. So cozy and comfy. It's Freddy's sweater.
That's a good point. I never really thought of how much Freddy's really into comfort. Really, he looks like he's very. Yeah. You're right. He is cozy. I don't know why he's so angry.
It's like slipping on an old sweater. That's what that's Freddy's adage. So I want to first tell you that I really am grateful. Your show provides an incredible service to not just me, but many, many others like me. You have a huge audience. I suffer from insomnia. I actually never really did, except for one brief point in my life. And then a multitude of things happened recently, besides obviously the pandemic. Within 5 months, I had an operation I'm 50 years old, had an operation for kidney cancer, and then 2 back-to-back operations on my neck for severe spinal stenosis.
And the second one was because the first one went wrong.
Yeah, it went wrong. I lost control. I was not able to use my left arm. It was horrifying. This is right before the pandemic happened. What wound up happening was I was, and am in recovery, and I had 13 years clean and sober, and all of a sudden I was on everything. I was on morphine, I was on Norco, I was on just really, they had me on everything, and the pain was at psychedelic levels of intensity, and to have lost my time in the program, and to my wife unfortunately was laid off from her job of 17 and a half years due to the pandemic. So now I'm providing for a family. I'm a type 1 diabetic too, so I can't sleep anymore. And so in a very real way, your podcast is not just content. It's a very real thing that's extremely helpful. And so really, thank you, Drew.
I'm really touched to know how much the podcast can help, because it's like all that stuff going on, that's a lot for any person to deal with. And then to have to deal with all that and go through all that and also want to be at your best to cope with all of it and not be able to get the sleep on top of it. It's like knowing the show can provide something like that for somebody, it's really, it goes back to kind of like your intro of me. It's like I was hopeless when I couldn't sleep as a kid. It was like, well, I'm just screwed. And that's kind of been my life philosophy for a long time, and try to cope with that. And now thinking about being able to make this show and help people like you, we had another friend, Joe, that we like introduced us. It's like to be able to go back in time and tell the kid, be like, don't worry, this is going to work out in a really weird way. One day. Like I'm touched to be able to know I can help people out there.
And Joe, what about you?
Well, I don't sleep anywhere near enough. I don't have insomnia, but I'm a notorious night owl. I find that a lot of times I get some of my best work done very late at night. Like for this show, I'm often up late at night preparing for it. So, I get like maybe 5-6 hours of sleep. Seems like kind of not enough. So I don't sleep great, but I have no problem falling asleep because I'm usually just like exhausted by the time I get in bed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, you do a very interesting thing on your podcast. Obviously, if you're listening, to Sleep With Me right now, then you know exactly what he does. But if you're on Discograffiti listening, well, why don't you describe it? I don't know why I would be describing it to you, but it's a fascinating approach. If you could kind of lay it out for us.
Well, I think we're going to do a meta approach tonight of it, but it's basically like imagine you had a friend you could call,
the Boar Bro,
and be like, yeah, hey, I'm just going to call you, and you're going to talk to me, and I'm not going to listen to you, and I want you to keep talking until I've been asleep for a long time. You could talk to me about anything, but make sure it's just barely entertaining enough. I kind of want to listen. But don't make it super interesting where I want to stay awake. And also don't come over here or anything. I don't want to clean up after you. I don't want to, have to, worry about crumbs or locking the door. So it's a very service like that. Like, just like if you were camping and you're sitting around, somebody tells you a story. The problem is, I guess I learned a long time ago, my stories, I tend to go off topic. I tend to get mixed up. As we'll talk about tonight, I tend to fixate on things unrelated to the assignments. It's like so the show involves a lot of tangents. Some people find it incredibly irritating if they like something that gets to the point or is straightforward. And I think it kind of reflective in the choices of all the artists you chose is like, I was thinking about it a lot. It's like, for some people fall asleep, they like listening to bugs flying around or birds chirping. Right. That gets on my nerves. Right. For me, anything peaceful or that's supposed to be peaceful might drive me off the wall. But so my show is more strange and friendly, and it's more of a distraction than something meant to directly put you to sleep, just to keep you company while you fall asleep. Almost like there's a TV on in the other room, or like one of the albums on here is like there's a rave going on down the street, but it's just far enough away that it's not annoying.
Yeah. So along with you, Drew, I would like to sign the Meander Pact, and there's no pressure to fall asleep here, and no pressure to listen either, but just have it going on in ways that mimic the intentions of Uber creator Brian Eno in his idea of having music as wallpaper. Sometimes his music was too interesting to just linger in the background.
Hey, you know what? I think we got a deck of Oblique Strategies cards somewhere here.
Yeah.
We actually do have a real deck. I don't know where it went. Well, we could pull one later, maybe.
Yeah, I would like to do just that. So, so we're all going to sign here on the dotted line for the Meander Pact, and launch into Sleep With Me, Discograffiti'S most somniferous LPs. As a side note here, the word somniferous is a great word. I love saying it. I want to point out that there's 3 words that have always, to me, been the most pleasing to say, and those would be puzzle, cube, and jelly.
Those are all pretty satisfying to hear you say those.
Well, I mean, try saying them, though.
Puzzle, that's not bad. Cube, I like that one less. Jelly.
That one's fun.
That one's
you just
pretty good.
can't.
Yeah, I can't deny that one.
Yeah,
makes me want to eat jelly though.
It does. Makes me want to eat a puzzle. Do you have any favorite words, Drew? Or
Whew, I always forget the words that are my favorite words, and then they come back up. But somniferous is a tough one for me because I have dyslexia. So it's like, but I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. So this may be a first for me, and that is definitely a word. When I picture it, I have no hope of spelling it. It's like SO. And then yeah.
SO, etc.
Discograffiti is right now in the final stages of approval with the FDA as a cure for dyslexia. So this is really going to help us quite a lot. I appreciate this. All right, so
we have a bunch of these records we're going to kind of be chatting about, and we're not going to be following our normal format where we're like, very fastidiously going in chronological order and rating everything and going into the weeds. We're just going to talk about kind of how these records kind of make us feel, and how their relationship to sleep, and sort of stuff like that. So
they're all really good.
We're taking off our record reviewer kind of hats today and doing something a little different. So
just know that they're all excellent.
Yeah, these are all we picked. These are all ones that they kind of represent a lot of different potential things. Like some people are going to require different things to fall asleep to. So these aren't all going to work for everybody. So we kind of chose a smattering of some things.
There is also one album on here that is not excellent, and it's up to all of you to find out which one that is.
All right, so we're going to start with Brian Eno, kind of the granddaddy of it all in terms of ambient music, and his album Discrete Music, which was kind of the birth of modern ambient music, really. I think Eno was influenced in this by the composer Eric Satie, who kind of tried to invent ambient music like in the early part of the 20th century with his Furniture music series. It was music that he composed to essentially be background music at like art installations for you to kind of not pay attention to. So kind of ahead of his time there, old Eric Satie. What you really want on this record is side one. That's the side that's of interest. Do you want to? So side one is,
that's putting it mildly.
Yeah, side one is like an experiment with tape loops, and it's very lovingly detailed on the back cover of the record how Eno did this technique. But he's basically trying to bring in the way the tape loops feed into a delay. He's kind of bringing in like some randomness. And some chants into these very soft kind of soundscapes.
C-H-A-N-C-E. Not Gregorian.
Oh, yes, chants, right. Randomness and that kind of, yes. One of the all-time best back album covers. There's a very nerdy diagram of how he creates the sound loop. That's very Eno. Eno's one of my heroes, too. One of my all-time Mount Rushmore musical heroes. So.
Drew, what did this album do for you?
I think like we're dealing with kind of the pinnacle to start out, and
true.
I don't know. I always think about like what year. Like my curiosity is like that somehow ambient music has gotten this terrible name for people that haven't listened to stuff like this with because there used to be this stuff called the Muzak, which people would listen to in the elevator, and that's like I think what the majority of maybe Americans under. I don't even know, over 40 or over 30 associate with ambient music.
Even that gets a bad name. I don't even think that's bad.
Yeah, I think ambient music sometimes gets looped in with like the sort of like CDs you'll find at like a crystal shop,
Yeah.
Kind of gets lumped in with that.
Yeah.
But this is different. This is a very different kind of thing. This is high art.
So what kind of feelings come up in listening to this, or does it actually have a wallpapery, recessive type effect for you?
Well, I would say, to already start to digress, there was one issue I had with it, which is that as the first album on a playlist, my song, like I may have over-listened to this album, and so like I may have some deep-seated resentments towards it, because it would like anytime it connected to Bluetooth, that it would jump to the beginning of the playlist and start playing it again and again and again. And also, I don't know if there's any parents out there that only have one music account that you share with a 15-year-old girl, but I do, and so there will be days where my daughter was supposed to be at school or still in class, and I would be trying to listen, and all of a sudden it would switch to like Tessa Violet, which is not bad to listen to, but not going from Brian Eno to Tessa Violet is not an experience I'm looking for. So that was the only challenge. I find, and I think the cover art is another good area to explore. This one is pretty relaxing on the front cover, and pretty simple. And it kind of has that feel of the next two ones after that.
We reduced it down to one Eno from the 70s, one from the 80s, one from the 90s. Because you could do, the original iteration of this list, I believe, had 8 Enos on it.
Yeah. It's talking about sharing an iTunes account or whatever. My 3-year-old sometimes will lay in bed and ask the Bluetooth speaker to play music for airports. Shows what kind of kid I have raised so far. He actually likes to listen to it to fall asleep to, and will play it himself.
My favorite story about your son is when he said, in your car, Alexa, go home.
Yeah, we were in the parking lot at Trader Joe's. He didn't want to hang out anymore. So he said, Alexa, drive home.
It's a pragmatic decision.
So now everybody's Alexas are answering questions, speaking.
They're trying to find their way home.
Yeah.
This record always, I discovered this, had to have been 20 years old. So it always struck me like if there was music playing at the Garden of Eden, this is what it would be. It's so pure, so beautiful. To me, does not achieve any kind of a wallpapery sort of a thing because it's too gorgeous for that. He has wallpapery records. In fact, one that's coming up, this one to me is just way too emotionally fraught. I love this record. I've probably heard the second side 5 times, and the first side I've heard probably 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with you that it may be too rich to sleep to, like just like a dessert, like it's like one of those desserts you can't eat the whole thing or something like that. But like to be fully asleep, but as a wind down or like looking out at something nice, it's perfect. Like for the evening.
It's kind of like a musical Rube Goldberg machine. He's kind of created this contraption, and then he stands back and lets it kind of do all the work. While he kind of like gently kind of turns an EQ knob here or there. It's mostly the machines doing the work. He kind of just like, and he's kind of tried to do a lot of those experiments over the years. Side 2 is an attempt to do that with orchestral instruments and do it like with them playing live. And it's kind of a failed experiment. It doesn't really have the same effect. I don't feel like side 2 doesn't really work for me, the orchestral side.
It's look, it wouldn't wake me up if you're just talking about, sleeping being the prime objective here. It's still going to achieve its goals, but mainly out of a sense of sort of aesthetic aimlessness. Moving ahead about 10 years, Brian Eno crossed paths with Harold Budd, and Harold Budd is a musician who really added some spice to the Eno broth. The Pearl is... I
wouldn't really call it spice.
Yeah, as soon as I said it, I thought,
sort of
Dave,
like,
you're way off base.
He like added yogurt to this.
He added yogurt. He added yogurt to the already existing yogurt. So The Pearl is my favorite Brian Eno record. It's my favorite record he's ever been involved with. And this one... entirely too fraught with emotion to act as wallpaper. This is the most beautiful ambient record ever made, in my opinion. And I don't know if I should be sticking with the word ambient or ambient.
Just alternate.
I got to commit. At some point, I got to commit.
I always go ambient. Ambient is what I go with, and I say it a lot. So.
I feel like ambient would insinuate more mysterioso.
But yes, maybe this one's ambient and some of the other ones.
Yeah, because side 2 is very mysterioso. Yeah. Drew, what's your how did this make you feel?
See, I have a lot of notes here. I guess I've got notes. I found it. It didn't get a 10 out of 10 for sleeping for me. There's let's see.
Speaking of knots, were you a Three's Company fan?
When the Three's Company was on, I think it was on reruns. And my dad hated I don't think he ever watched the show. And my dad's not a super conservative guy, but he had something about I think he must have thought it was just orgies or something like that. Like he had no idea other than the basic conceit that a guy was living with two women, and so he would lose his temper every time we tried to watch it.
Isn't that the genius of the show, though? Is that it, it seems to have this, very Dionysian, hedonistic, balls to the wall orgy thing, but it's one of the most innocent. Everything is sparked by just a linguistic misunderstanding.
Yeah, it gives me anxiety for that reason.
Yeah,
it's like, if they could just knew what they were there. This is all just a misunderstanding. It's okay, everybody.
But there's there's a lot of brutal Roper versus Furley debates, and I'm curious where you stand as far as Don Knotts goes.
I mean, I think thinking back now, looking back and thinking that you had John Ritter and Don Knotts together, I guess that's enough reason to rewatch it, just to think about those two working together. I can't believe. So I'd have to fall on that side to be like, man, what is it like now to watch those two playing off each other? Or is there too much energy? I can't remember.
I know, I'm Team Roper.
Yeah.
What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I love the over-the-top facial antics of Don Knotts, but I realize now as I've gotten older,
the original cast of Three's Company is a little too understated for you.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of there's a heck of a lot of subtext to dig through in the Roper Roper episodes. So for that reason, I'm probably going to have to stick with the Roper stuff.
All right.
The Roper material. So then moving ahead 10 years to...
I didn't really talk about the Pearl very much.
What?
I didn't get in there.
It's only the greatest ambient record of all time.
Well, it's also, this one's kind of special for me. I'm not exaggerating. This is probably my number one most listened to ever album. And it's almost always in the kind of wallpaper context. I've gone to sleep to this record a million times. I put it on if I'm on a flight, I'll put it on to try to fall asleep. This one I actively use for sleep reasons a lot, and I listen to it thousands.
Does
of times.
Does it make you cry?
No, I don't really.
No?
This one does.
It has made me cry.
It's kind of sort of wallpapery to me in a way that you guys don't really find it that way. This one's to me this is my favorite. There's another one of these called the Plateau of Mirror. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like the Pearl Part 0. I think they made the Plateau of Mirror before, but it's kind of more of the same. If you really like the Pearl,
it's terrific. It's Plateau of Mirror is excellent.
Yeah, it's more. It's
strongly recommended.
I would say that the Pearl is sort of somehow more catchy. The melodies are kind of more recognizable, and Plateau of Mirror is maybe a little bit more wallpapery. So if you're looking for sleep purposes, you might want to give that one a spin.
Also, Harold Budd is more front and center on Plateau of Mirror, and right. Brian Eno's not messing around with the atmospherics quite as much.
Right. So the next one we're going to talk about is another Brian Eno album. This is the third one, and then we're going to be done with Mr. Eno and thank him for his contributions. And this is the album Neroli. Now, this is an album that is definitely not going to disturb your sleep. This is definitely not going to jar you awake. This one seems like maybe the most sleep-inducing record on the list.
This is definitely.
The subtitle is called Thinking Music, and this is kind of a question for you, Drew. That seems to be an apt name for it. It does seem to kind of inspire sort of like deep thought. Do you think the art of falling asleep involves thinking or not thinking? Or could you see this causing people to think too much to fall asleep?
I don't know. I found it when I was thinking about what makes something perfect to fall asleep to and stay asleep to. The fact that this is no tracks, it's continuous, and it did feel just like background. It's almost like the music is thinking for you. But it would be good music if you're sitting around thinking during the day. But it's like the Pearl might be better if you're awake at 3 a.m. and you're sitting out and you're trying to figure something out. Where this might be good for light thinking or, thinking about someone you have a crush on or something else that's going to help you fall asleep instead of thinking about thinking about spreadsheets, probably some other.
I find myself when I'm falling asleep, I'm always kind of thinking about something, that's why maybe this works well for me. I'll start, I don't try to shut off my brain and stop thinking. I'll start thinking about whatever it is I'm thinking about at that moment. And before I know it, I'm out. So
Drew, what are the circumstances for you going to sleep? Are you listening to music? Are you what's the foundation for you?
So for me, it's a wind down routine. So a lot of times I was listening, and most of the time I don't listen to music, but I was trying it out like as part of a wind down. I'll read some fiction or something. And then it's kind of like after that, it's like a roll of the dice. It's like my thinking is like it's like awakening a monster. So for me, it's like anything I could do to like try to think about something that I'm not involved in or that is not real. It's like is the only way I have a hope of getting asleep. As soon as my brain starts to activate, it's like, oh my God, what are we going to do about that? And I'm like, wasn't even worried about. Oh well, yeah, you should be worried about it. And I just go right down that rabbit hole. So it's like I try to slip into sleep. Like it's like I'll be reading, and then it's like I'll start to feel like I'm nodding off, and it's like, okay, I'm just going to close the book, and I'm just going to try to go out. And get in there before the rest of me realizes it.
Now, do you ever get into a thing where you start to become self-conscious about being a sleep expert? So you're second guessing your ability to get to sleep because of your high standing in the sleeping community?
No, most sleep scientists think I'm a joke for the most part. So like I don't think I have.
Are you
more
serious?
Of a are they like they're split on like the usefulness of the podcast, or they're like, oh, that's just this weird thing. I mean, some people
are they
like,
aggressive
oh, that's
towards
cool.
you?
No. I think most people, but it's like they're just like, oh, that's strange. Like people that don't listen to the podcast mostly are like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, the same thing if like you were like, I don't think it's that different, even though I make it. It's like, oh, well, I wear crystals and I don't get colds. Like you'd be like, okay. Like if someone said that to me, I'd be like, "Oh, okay, that's great." Like it's the same thing. I've listened to this weird guy tell me stories to put me to sleep. You're like, oh, "Okay, moving on." Anyway, so it's more of like that. Like it's trivial to an outside person because they haven't been impacted by it.
Right.
But yeah, for me, it's like it keeps the show relatable. Like every night that I can't sleep or I wake up early or whatever it is, I'm like, okay, well, at least I can still make this podcast.
So the next one is Stars of the Lid.
Right. So yeah, Stars of the Lid. So, I find that some ambient records kind of have like the effect of sculpture where it's kind of like time sort of stops. Like this is kind of one of those records. It's kind of like long.
And the record is And Their Refinement of the Decline.
Yeah, they have a few.
2007.
They have a few, but this one I think is the most appropriate for this show, for sleeping. There's a complete absence of any kind of like beat, and it makes time feel like it's passing like very slowly. It's all like very consonant. There's not really any harmonic tension in anything. It's these sort of like glacier like orchestral samples that are very gently treated and kind of just like swell on you like very slowly.
That's a perfect
very
description.
kind of enveloping, and it just kind of gives me the feeling of like it seems somehow like you can reach out and touch it, like it's sort of three-dimensional to me, moving that slowly.
Feels like sound gusts to me, like
Right.
wind gusts of music. How did this one roll over you?
I kind of put it down for me. It was like good walking music too. I guess I'm always like, okay, can I sleep to this probably, or can I slowly relax to it? But I was also like, how else could I use this? And it's like, oh, this would be good for walking in space, walking in fields. I guess it would be more music walking in interesting places. And then I don't know if you noticed this, but it's like, I don't know if it's ambient music that gives them the freedom. Like there's so many, there's a lot of good song titles in here.
Oh yeah.
And I think that like ambient music has it's like Trippy's Demise. Oh boy. And then the art, I think kind of goes along with that enveloping feel. It's kind of like a bar graph. It's got a nice calming orange behind it, but it's not a perfectly sculptured bar graph. Maybe it's construction paper, I don't know, a little circle. So I do find the art not overly demanding. And maybe that's another part of the music too, where it's not asking too much of you as a listener.
I'll tell you, sometimes titling your music to reflect the idea that it's going to put you to bed soon is a good idea. Like Another Ballad for Heavy Lids, for example. You certainly know what you're about to tune into. But December Hunting for Vegetarian Fuckface doesn't really set up exactly what you're going to hear.
Yeah, the other thing about this record, and a lot of these actually, is some records sound really good at low volumes, where they're kind of just peeking through the noise in the background. I think that's kind of what how Eno invented ambient music. There's the whole story of he was in a hospital, he'd been in a car wreck. Someone put on a record for him and then left the room. He couldn't really get up to raise the volume.
Like bad friends do.
Right. So the record was on very low volume, and it was blending in with rain outside, and it was the mix of all of that seemed very hypnotic to him. And I think if you're going to sleep to this record, I think at low volume, it sounds really nice. If you have it just kind of faintly creeping in there.
It's pretty emotional too.
Yeah.
I find it to be a pretty emotional experience hearing this, and very long too. It's a double album, and each of the albums leans toward the long side.
Yeah, and the tracks are very long and move very, very slowly. So time is kind of your friend with this record. It's they really do slow down time, and they have some other excellent records too.
They do. This is the last one they released.
Yes, right.
It was what 15 years ago now.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. So the next one I'm actually very excited to talk about for very digressive purposes. A gentleman named Ernest Hood released a record in 1975 called Neighborhoods. And what you're basically hearing here is improvised music over a slew of field recordings of kids playing in the neighborhood locally. And they're on their bikes and riding around, getting candy from the local candy store. And it is unbelievably meditative. It is incredible for sleep. It's as far as the kind of thing that would put me to sleep, because it inspires, really, really great unspooling mind fantasias about when I was a kid riding around on a bike. Drew, did you have the kind of neighborhood where you did that?
I did, and go in the woods, ride a bike, go in the woods.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in upstate New York, or central New York, they call it if you live in New York, Syracuse.
I went I went to SU.
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
So, riding bikes and getting lost. This was one of my favorite discoveries on this list. This definitely, in the fact that it was made in the 70s, it makes it even more impressive to me, because it's like this is the kind of stuff people are trying to do with podcasts now. It's like take field recordings and repurpose them, or make them cool. And this was just, I don't know, for me, there was almost too much of my story brain activates when there's a mix of
I can see that
music and noise, but it was perfect for me for lying in bed. And it's just amazing listen. Out all this stuff, there's a lot of amazing listens, but this was one. It's
a special record. It really is.
There's a lot in this one for me. So the Ernest Hood who made this was a jazz guitarist, and he contracted polio and lost the use of one of his hands, so he could no longer play guitar. But he could play the zither, which is open strings. Mm-hmm. So that's the main instrument on this. It's his zither and a synthesizer.
I always thought it was zither. Is it zither?
Zither. Mm.
I mean, I'm not challenging you on this. If anyone knows how to say it.
I always said zither. I could be wrong.
Drew,
you guys having a zither duel? Duel of with scissors?
The thing is there's one episode where I said a word incorrectly. What word was it? It was outlier. So at the beginning of the episode, I said outlier, and then somehow during the episode, Joe notified me that it was how it was actually pronounced. And so I fixed it, and of course said it again during the episode,
but correctly. Yeah.
So I had several of my friends that I grew up with texting me just about the moment. And so now I'm so hypersensitive about making sure that
I pronounce words right.
Exactly.
So anyway, he uses a zither, however you prefer.
Yeah.
And also a super rare synthesizer called the Roland SH3A, which I have actually never even seen one in person. I'm a pretty big synthesizer enthusiast. But I used to own a similar one, the SH1000, which was kind of the predecessor to this one. So these sounds, or these kind of synth sounds, are also really familiar to me. Really beautiful the way he uses it. But this record's way ahead of its time, and it's really beautiful. It's to me, it's more of a daytime album. I could take a nap to this album.
Yeah.
Maybe like reading like a neighbor, like Stephen King. I don't know if you ever read Stephen King, but he always spends a lot of time in neighborhoods. And I wonder too if the analog process makes it more listenable to the ambient and the music together versus it being so much easier in digital that maybe there's a cleanness. I don't know, because it is like it is less intrusive, where some of the newer stuff kind of feels like more intrusive or more obvious.
Right.
Where this feels more organic.
This has a certain sprawl to it that to me is very unassuming.
Ernest Hood was in his 50s when he made this. So he'd kind of already had a whole career, and he's kind of invents this whole style of making music in his 50s. Very inspiring.
Yeah. What did you guys get when the Ice Cream Man came?
I would usually get the strawberry thing. The
strawberry shortcake with the crumbs on the outside?
Yeah.
Drew, what was your jam?
I would do the chocolate one with the crunches, or that rainbow
Nestle?
rocket thing.
Nutter butter. That's
like a Nestle?
It was like the same. It was. I think they called it a chocolate eclair, even though it's nothing like it. So
man,
it was like
that stuff was good.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one is kind of an ambient classic, I think you would say.
Yeah.
It is by Gas, who's a German composer, and it's called Pop.
Sorry, I sniffled. It's called Pop.
This shows up on a lot of like greatest ambient albums ever kind of lists, and this album to me is the equivalent of like a white noise machine. You have it on, and it has this sort of very gentle kind of hiss to the top of it. And this is another one where it's kind of really good at low volume. I've used this to sleep to many times.
I think low volume thing for me was the same thing. This is what I was thinking of when it's like, oh, this is like a rave that's like 2 or 3 miles away, and you could just hear it, and you could lie in bed and enjoy it from afar, like just enough thumping to comfort you. And the only thing I was like, oh, maybe if you're sleeping to it, you want to loop one song.
Yeah. Like
pick your favorite. That was the only other thing, because of the changes, the transitions.
Yeah, that's kind of a good point. That would be a good way to do it. Just put it on repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're all like long too. The pieces are all long.
Right.
It kind of just sounds like a hissing radiator.
Yeah, there's also kind of a babbling stream kind of thing to it.
There is.
It sounds like there's a little bit of like kind of bubbling going on with the white noise. So it kind of has like a little like babbling brook.
You know what it really reminds me of? When I was, this was maybe around when I was 18, I would have this mental image when I would listen to the Talking Heads song Drugs, which is on Fear of Music, one of my favorite songs by them, with a very heavy Brian Eno sonic imprint, especially in the chorus part. So for whatever reason, I cannot tell you why, during the chorus of that song, I would always think of a group of women out in the forest, and water is up to their ankles, and they're taking the water and scooping it up in their hands and washing the trunks of the trees with it in the woods.
That's very specific.
It's very specific. I can't tell you why that is, but this record reminds me of that. It very much feels like you're in a forest.
Yeah, this is one of the sleepiest ones on the list to me. I thought that this one was. This one I have personal experience with. This has kind of been a long time favorite.
Nice simple titles, not demanding.
Yeah, right. Very minimalist. It's definitely a minimalist approach to ambient music. So Bibio, Phantom Brickworks is the next thing on the list. Now, there are a bunch of very good Bibio albums.
He's amazing.
He's kind of a composer, singer, songwriter kind of guy.
I see him more as a DJ.
Yeah, that too. He's definitely has a foot in that world, but very influenced by like Boards of Canada and synth music like that. But this record is this kind of pure ambient album. It's all instrumental. It has a very like lonely kind of quality to it, but at the same time is very beautiful. I kind of like sort of link loneliness and beauty in some ways. It's like this. This record kind of feels like a weighted blanket or something. Just those things. It has a warm kind of fuzzy thing to it. There's a word I discovered.
Drew is like a weighted blanket too.
Yeah. I'm like a wet blanket. Yeah. But there's a word. The phenomenon of a nostalgia for something that never happened, right? So there's a word to describe that: anemoia. So anemoia is the word for like.
That's interesting. How do you spell that?
It's Anemoia. And I think this record really kind of captures that feeling where it's like, you kind of feel like you miss this sort of alternate universe that you don't really live in.
I think the English language really needs to send out a press release about this word.
It's a fine word.
I love Bibio. And I've been listening to Bibio since, what's the early record? Ambivalence Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
What a great, great album that is. Phantom Brickworks really took me by surprise because I thought it was going to be just a little diversion in his career. And it wound up being sort of when you dip your toe into the water of a new thing and you turn out to be really good at it. He's excellent at this kind of stuff.
What do you think of this record, Drew?
I thought this was one of the most sleepy ones since I think I wrote 8 out of 10, then I put 9 out of 10, then I put 10 out of 10. Very chill. I think Phantom Brickworks too. I don't know what all good top means, but I put that all good top double exclamation point. Then it has something written here that may say non-Eno, new Eve, or now Eno. And I like the simplistic art. He also prodigious user of all caps. I don't know if that's good for sleeping, but I think this in long songs too.
Yeah, very long. By the way, your notes are just kind of a masterpiece of.
I'm gonna go with now Eno.
yeah, kind of brilliant.
All three of those could work though.
Yeah. I mean, never has just reading notes like that been so artistically satisfying. So definitely a really good and not filled with any kind of weird bald-faced surprises.
So the next one up is a really weird one. Beaver and Krause, Gandharva. So this is a delightfully strange recording from 1971. Paul Beaver is kind of like a Forrest Gump kind of figure in electronic music. He had one of the first Moog synthesizers. He made a record with Hal Blaine called Psychedelic Percussion. That is just Hal Blaine, session drummer extraordinaire who played on all the great 60s Phil Spector and Brian Wilson records. It's Hal Blaine just kind of playing some drum beats while our friend Paul Beaver here makes crazy Moog sound effects. It's a really strange record. It sounds pretty much exactly how you'd expect it to sound. There was also, at the Monterey Pop Festival, there was a booth there, like a little pavilion that showcased the Moog synthesizer. This is one of those, the first Moog that looks like a telephone switchboard, big giant patch machine.
And some people could definitely say that this is like a seminal, almost like an instructional, like this is what this instrument is capable of doing kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of those early
I see
Moog
it as a
are.
musical fantasia where it's, there's so many different styles that are utilized in this record. It's fun. You could definitely argue that it's not something you would fall asleep to, but I will say the first song is definitely hysterically unsleep-worthy.
Yeah, there's like a boogie blues kind of thing.
Yeah.
You got to skip that one.
You got to skip that one. You have to. Not going in the playlist.
There's also all the stuff they did at Grace Cathedral that really takes advantage of that big reverb space. So
Side 2.
Yeah, they record a lot of it in a big, huge cathedral in San Francisco, and it's really all about the sound.
And they recorded it live.
Yeah, the sound of that space is really lush and gorgeous. So that side is pretty sleepy to me too. All the stuff in the cathedral.
The farther this album goes, the more sleepy it gets, and then by the time you're toward the end of the record. And what I mean by that is the last 4 songs or so, you're really just like, it feels like this weightlessness has taken over, kind of akin to one of the records that didn't make it on the list because you could put every single one of his records on, Eno's Apollo. Some of this stuff feels like that. Short film for David toward the end, and Good Places, a few others. Super, super good stuff. And also, as far as recording in churches being a thing, I would say this is way up there. And the Cowboy Junkies cannot hold a candle to this record, if you're asking me, which you didn't. But I'm going to, of course, tell you anyway.
I also have to, I think, salute. Well, my note says salad to the vanishing Bond Eagle, but that was one of my favorite songs. Salute to the Vanishing Bald Eagle. I must have listened to that one like 20, 25 times. But this had this fun to it that sometimes is also missing, not from this list, but on other ambient music that, and again, that like I think takes away from bedtime or relaxing is like when it's taking itself too seriously or not letting go or not going for it, or holding back in some way. It gets on my nerves. But this was definitely loose.
Now,
in a good way.
Do you like super new agey type of stuff, or not mind it, or what's your stance on all that stuff? Like,
I don't know. I guess I haven't listened to a lot of new age music unless I'm around somebody that's into it, and then it's always in a contextual manner. Like it's like, oh, I'm waiting to get a massage and it's playing, or you're visiting someone's house that's into it. And those probably it would be more about my lack of control of the music than the music itself. It's like, no, I can't listen to this. Is making me crazy. But it's more because I feel like I need to have control of all things in my life. So it's like, oh, I don't want to listen to this right now. It's just like when you're in a car with somebody, or somebody's like, you got to listen to this. We got a 12-hour ride. I got a 12-hour playlist. You're like, oh my God. What
are the rules with regard to music in a car? Is it the person driving, or is it the person whose car it is who should have control of the music?
Oof. I think the person driving. I mean, I guess I wonder what good people. I guess I'd put it out to like, how do good people behave? I don't consider myself a good person. So for me, if I'm in the car, I want to be in control at all times of what's playing. But I think now
that's
driving,
impossible. Your daughter, you would allow your daughter to put on her music, right?
Yeah, or sometimes I wonder when, I feel like people like Luddites may be judgmental, but I'm totally fine on a road trip with everybody listening to like put your earbuds in, like because I might want to listen to a podcast, I might have to listen to something for work. It's like, but I think there is a communal driving thing, and it's probably a practice. This is probably what these good optimistic people do. They say, let me hear what you have to. Oh, you 12-hour playlist. I can't wait.
Well, so what is the longest trip you've ever taken with somebody else where you had to negotiate like that?
Well, I had this summer I had to relocate my dad's car from Florida to, I don't know if we went to New Jersey or New York, with my dad in the car. And instead of listening to music, he literally talked for the entire, like I was like, how, like it was like, he's just at that age in his life where he's looking back. So I must have heard every story. And when we got there, I was like, I think you talked the entire trip. Like,
how long is that? So this is maybe like 15 hours?
I think it takes like, 15 to 20 hours.
Okay.
So that's like the longest one.
Is this? Have you ever had a long distance trip with your dad?
Yeah, we've had ones before, but this one I was like, what am I going to listen to, or how are we going to pass the time? And it was like, oh, not a problem. This is like an opportunity. I'm like, oh, one day. My daughter was with me. I'm like, oh, one day you'll be going through this too. And she was much more. She put her earbuds in a lot of the time.
So it wasn't just the two of you.
Yeah, no, it's the three of us. Yeah.
Okay. So I remember when I moved out here, I came out with it was just my dad and I, and we packed up my Toyota Camry with whatever fit in it, and this is 2008. So my dad, months away from the trip, was, with the, rectangular legal pad, the yellow legal pad pages, was creating this list of how everything was going to be down to the second. And I remember it was like driving me a little bit nuts because, my only experiences on the road were melting right into the moment, Kerouac style, bring a tape recorder around with me, tape things that were happening. It was a whole thing. And so this was the antithesis of that. And I remember a guy in recovery, his name's Harry. He gave me the greatest piece of advice. I needed right at that moment to hear it, and I did, which is make it all about your dad. And I did, and we had one stupid, silly, quick argument. Otherwise, it went smashingly. We just did whatever the heck he wanted to do. Okay, so George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. This is the record that I was referring to when I was talking about the bad record and the bunch.
No, you're not talking about All Things Must Pass proper.
No, sir.
This is a very specific part.
That's my first question is why disc 3?
Here's why. Okay, so the third record is, there is a corollary between record 3 and Sleep With Me, the show Sleep With Me. First of all, this album was introduced to me by Joe, by my co-host. I had never heard it before. I'm a huge Beatle fan, always have been. All Things Must Pass, for whatever reason, except for My Sweet Lord, slipped under my radar. When Joe introduced it to me, it blew my mind. It replaced at the top of the list John Lennon Plastic Ono Band for being the greatest Beatles solo record for me. However, one of the great things about it is an imperfect masterpiece. Record number 3 is some of the most aimless jamming I've ever heard. It's almost like he just did this in order for the piece to have a giganticness about it. And that was the only reason. But I consider it, these are some of the greatest players of all time. This is George Harrison with the band that became Derek and the Dominoes, Eric Clapton and a bunch of other incredible players, just jamming totally aimlessly. So they're just sort of an embarrassment of riches that overspills on this. It goes nowhere, but it's perfect.
This is the sort of, if you want to bore yourself to sleep, you put this on?
Yeah, exactly.
This is the way to do it if you want to. I don't really consider this to be part of All Things Must Pass. It technically comes with it when you buy the album, but All Things Must Pass is really a double album.
It is.
With this kind of as a throw-in. I think George even said that this was kind of just a throw-in for the fans. Nothing happens in it. It's a very weird kind of jam. That there's the I just love the fact that this big epic giant album ends with a kind of Chuck Berry kind of style jam called "Thanks for the Pepperoni." It's really very not epic way to end your album.
Drew, do you think I was being purposely contentious by adding this to the list?
I don't even know if I had the right. I was like, "Who are you?" This is my notes. Who you calling Apple Scruffs? Question mark.
That's awesome.
No, the actual album proper is
the album proper is intensely good. We're not talking about the record itself.
Now, I could never get away with. How do you guys listen to music whilst sleeping? So I could never get away with actually playing music.
Anymore.
Right, being married. Yeah. But I do have one of those little like headband devices. It's like kind of a headband with little earbuds in it. And so you can kind of lay down with them. Like if I try to put earbuds in and lay down, it just hurts my ear. But with the headband thing on, I can kind of lay there and sleep and like listen to music, which I did for a lot of this episode. I listened to a lot of these whilst trying to sleep.
Drew, is it a common thing for you to listen to music at bedtime?
I mean, now it is. I listen on a speaker, but I'm single, so I have an advantage. I've tried.
Stop rubbing it in, man.
The headbands, but I also find like even on planes when I'm trying to sleep and listen to stuff, like either the earbuds or even headphones, like at some point it becomes painful or irritating or sweat-inducing. And then, it's a tough with somebody else. Like, I don't know. I have listeners that use the headbands that put their phone on their speaker and stick it under their pillow. But I think putting it a speaker and putting it on a sleep timer is usually the best bet for me, because then I don't want it to be like, if I'm worried about listening to the music while I'm sleeping and it waking me up because I'm trying to process something, or be like, oh, what did they just do there?
Right.
And then now I got to wake up and figure it out.
The dynamics of this record remind me of driving through Kansas. There's not much dynamics topographically as far as driving through Kansas, except for the fact that your windshield becomes something of a bug graveyard.
This is kind of one of those ones where it's sort of a curse being a musician, because I feel like listening to it, all I can think of is, oh, these guys are just goofing around. They don't even like, it's, I think the illusion of it, like I feel like I can, see them like looking at the clock, thinking like, when's this going to be over? It's kind of half-hearted. Interesting pick, but
It is something to kick around a little bit.
Next up is one of my favorites on this entire list, which is Aphex Twin, Ambient Works Volume 2, which I think really works as a come-down album. There's kind of a whole genre of ambient music from like the 90s and beyond that seems to be dedicated to helping like clubbers come off their MDMA high or something. This seems like a classic of that genre of the come down album.
Really has aged well.
Yeah, it's a stunning album, and I this is another one that I've got that I have used to go to sleep to many times.
Drew, when you let this one wash over you, how did it feel on your skin?
So this one was one of the better experiences, because I was listening to it in a hotel overlooking, like I had a hotel room and it had like a decent view, but it was raining and it was over this like convention
Where
center.
was this?
I think this was in Orlando, but not in the like near the Orlando Convention Center. So it was like I was able to like just lie down and stare out the window and look at the tourists. I don't know, there was like all the chain restaurants. It's a street with like full of chain restaurants, just the right amount of traffic, just the right amount of hotels, and it fit perfectly with that, like pitch dark room so you could see out the window. And I was literally just chilling listening to this.
It's very long. It's 3 hours long, but that seems to be a strength of it, not a drawback.
It really is.
You can really kind of, it feels like kind of it's the first time I'm listening to it every time, sort of.
Yeah, you get lost in it. Yeah, you get lost of where you were.
This record to me is like the sound of being awake at 4 a.m.
What it must be like to make this music. I mean, the lonely late nights. I got to imagine there's a lot of those involved in this.
He supposedly was inspired by trying to capture the feeling of lucid dreams when he was making it. So this record is attached to the concept of sleep, as it was being created. I think that's kind of the thing he was going for. There are parts of it that are really kind of warm and like blankety. There are parts that are very cold and kind of distant. So there's a bunch of different flavors of that kind of, late night 4 a.m. come down sort of feeling. This one I highly recommend. I think you can.
Very, very soothing, like on a molecular level. This is a very soothing record I found.
Yeah. Another one that's, always on the best ambient album ever lists, kind of a classic of the genre.
Drew, out of curiosity here, so you're a guy who's very famous for wanting to be asleep as soon as is humanly possible. Now, what about back in the day when it was all about staying up as long as possible? What is the longest that you've ever been awake before crashing?
I don't even want to think about it. But I was also well known for sleeping for days at a time, or I was because I lived in New York City for a while. So I would get up normally at like 4 in the afternoon. I would be like one of those people waking up at 4 in the afternoon, and then at some point trying to readjust my schedule to try to live a normal life. And there's just hope. Like once you get on 4 p.m., between 2 and 4 p.m. wake up, you're kind of the normal world is tough to access.
Yes. I remember the most psycho Aldous Huxley that I ever was with regard to sleep. In 1994, I submitted a script in for to try to get a grant, and somehow my computer file got erased, and I had to retype from scratch, and I stayed awake for 3 entire nights. It's not something I ever did before or since. And there were, I remember auditory hallucinations. there was nothing visual, but definitely hearing voices before I wound up going to sleep.
I've had the experience, like I haven't ever done the thing of staying up like for days at a time, but I've been like on tours before where it's like, you know, you start to get to sleep like, you know, it's like after the show, you hang around for a while, you're going to sleep really as the sun's coming up, and then like, you know, ride on the bus overnight to the next city. You wake up, you know, and it's like getting dark already. It's really, especially like, you know, touring in like Europe or something. You're up in like Scandinavia or something, the wrong time of year. It's like you like kind of can go days at a time without seeing sunlight if you do that. Yeah, I don't recommend that.
It's very off-putting. So this next guy, Bill Evans, is a pianist who most people would be, even though the world of jazz sniffs rarefied air. This is a gentleman who a lot of people would have had exposure to, having listened to Miles Davis's Kind of Blue. He is the pianist on those historic sessions, and Moonbeams is a record that he did after bassist Scott LaFaro passed away. Moonbeams is an amazing step back into the fray. Joe chose this one. It calls to mind my own career in playing piano, which is begins and ends with a song that my mother had in a music book called Piccolo Pete. And it goes, Piccolo Pete walks down the street, playing his piccolo, plays every tune he knows, tra-la-la, tra-la-la, tra-la-la-la. Thanks. But
very nice. You had some singing in.
Yeah, had to. I mean, my mom's going to be sobbing hysterically just listening to that. She knows.
Drew, what was your take on Bill Evans' Moonbeams? And are you much of a jazz aficionado? And is this too much in the supper club kind of feel, or do you think you could sleep to this?
I think I could. So I think this is again good with the subgenres. I think for me, if I could make my handwriting, wind down and chill, like a drink. This is like a drink before bed, pillow softener,
a hot toddy.
To unwind, to kiss. I don't know. I think this one and another one we're going to talk about, I think again would benefit from the lower volume. Mm-hmm. But I think this is something I could definitely sleep to.
Maybe this is like a pre-sleep kind of thing. You put it on and then, you know, as you're kind of winding down, and then put another one on when you're actually going to go to sleep.
This is a great one for the list. This is a sophisticated, very sophisticated twist on the Insomniac's dream come true.
Well, Bill Evans is one of my favorite musicians who ever lived, and I can't even imagine what kind of like concentration and focus it would require to play the way Bill Evans plays, because his magic is really in all his voicing. So like every note he plays, he has this very innovative style of voicing. It's basically like choosing which notes you're going to play in which order, what notes from a chord to include and things like that. And he has this immaculate sense of voicing that also seems kind of off the cuff, like he's doing it as he's like making these calculations really super quickly. It seems almost impossible.
He is one sad guy.
Yeah, and so
first of all, you can see it in his face.
Right.
You don't need to even listen to his music. His face, every picture I've ever seen from every phase of his life, from when he's unkempt and bearded to when he's a supper club regular, and he's got the hair slicked back and everything. He's never smiling.
Yeah.
Looks like a guy who's haunted by a lot of demons.
He's a serious cat. He's kind of like a chess grandmaster or something.
Mm-hmm.
He just sees the board in a different way than anybody else really. So this album, this is kind of like a deep in thought kind of record for me. Like it kind of like really gets me to kind of like pay attention to it. There's just so much. He brings so much feeling out of all those voices, and you got to also mention, especially in this context, his touch. So he kind of has a kind of cascading waterfall sort of touch on the piano. He just gets a different tone out of it. I think it's because the way when he's spelling out a chord, it's the way he weights his hands. It's like the right hand, maybe he's playing a little bit louder than the left, and maybe his middle finger's a little louder than the thumb. He just has such control over all that he can kind of have that incredible sensitive touch. So, One of my favorite records ever. My favorite Bill Evans record. It's mostly ballads, and it's I highly recommend this one.
The next one is a compilation called Mono no Aware.
We know the concept of mono no aware itself, right? What that means. It's kind of like the word anamoya.
The pathos of things.
Yeah. So what that really means is it's kind of like this is interesting. It's the constant awareness that things are impermanent, right? So it's like, and then the phenomenon itself is.
You mean the horror of that?
Well, yeah. It's sort of more like a gentle sadness that you kind of feel when you know that you're not going to experience that thing again.
The kind of thing that keeps you up at night and makes you turn towards scoots.
And then you also know, that feeling itself is also going to pass. So that's kind of a short term and a long term kind of gentle kind of sadness. And I think this record kind of encapsulates that pretty well. There's the one piece, the Eve Toomer piece, Limerence. It's that has the snippets of a conversation that seem like. There's something about it that seems like it's a relationship that has ended.
This one, it makes me think of mixtapes. As a medium that's coming back, the vinyl record is Joe Kennedy and I were very, very big fans. And I hope compact discs never make a comeback. But that thing of the mixtape, Drew, I'm not sure how far into this you got, but I would go batshit crazy. I'm curious if it was a thing for you.
I was a person who fantasized about getting mixtapes. So I would make mixtapes in my head of mixtapes I would like to get from girls that were never delivered. And I did not have a wistful, gentle sadness about it. I was like crushing. So that I would, I don't have the ability to retain very much. Even when I was a kid, I didn't. But I had the ability to imagine. So it'd be like, oh, one day she's going to make a mixtape for me. Maybe she's working on it tonight. So that I would listen to music and assemble the mixtape in my mind. So the mixtape in my mind, that could be another Sleep With Me episode right there.
This is that episode.
Yeah.
So, just out of curiosity, I mean, you never got any kind of mixtape that was along those lines? I found that hard to believe.
No, I eventually did. Like, I got some from, I did get one from one woman or a girl. That didn't.
Well, was it a woman or a girl? How old was she?
It was a girl. She was 22. So 22. Okay. 22.
A young woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then a couple friends made me mixtapes. I remember the first one I got was like a bunch of stuff like Jane's Addiction or something. But I didn't appreciate, and then I would just, I was one of those people, I would listen to something like 150, 200 times over and over again. So if someone gave me a tape, I would just put it in and listen to it again and again and again.
Are there other ways of listening to music?
I don't know.
I have not come across it yet. When I recall making mixtapes, I would always carry a tape recorder around with me. I often would have an external mic that was snaking up my my shirt and down my sleeve, and it was clipped onto this thing that's called a watch. And so I would walk around like that. So when I did my mixes, I would already have, notes as far as what audio that I recorded I was going to use as is that the word interstitial?
You're making, look at you, you're making field recordings.
Yeah, I was making field recordings. This is early to mid 90s that I did the bulk of that work, actually through all the 90s. And so I was using songs, I was using field recordings, and I was doing cut and paste jobbies, Barosian, sometimes linguistically, otherwise I'd be doing, spending a lot of time, way too much time. I was taping stuff on the sides of the cassette box, the front, the back. So, yeah, very much into it. This reminds me of that. I love the music. Drew, hopefully you liked it, because I feel tremendously guilty with all the work that you have to do, taking up your time with music you don't like.
No, there wasn't anything on here that I did not like. So
sweet.
The good news is that you could put almost all this on and do other stuff. That's the good news.
Okay, next up, Huercoes. I know, Joe, you're going to talk about this first. I just got to say, I had to say the guy's name.
You almost rolled your
I was thinking of that I was being a pretentious jackass, but I just skirted it.
He's kind of just like a white guy from Kansas. So the where you don't really need to roll the R, I don't think.
But I'd like to.
So this is another one, kind of like the Gas pop album, that it really uses white noise as kind of a recurring character.
It sounds like mist on a train window, like how that feels.
There's kind of some record crackle in there that's very soothing. There's a very kind of subtle, kind of tucked in the mixer, record crackle, and this kind of luxurious bed of very pretty white noise. This one seems like it's very emotionally neutral to me. It's maybe slightly melancholy, but this feels like a very comfortable world for me to live in.
How'd this one go for you, Drew?
I liked it. Let's see. Nice synth. I like the synth. My only there was a couple problems with the sleeping. I like, which is there's some crackling effects.
Did you wind up listening to this one at night, or did this wind up as a day listen?
This one I remember listening because I was like, don't listen to me what I'm saying this, but I was trying to write notes and drive because so that's what my handwriting would not be readable even if I wasn't writing while I was driving. But
thank God your handwriting wasn't readable, because it wound up being the thing.
Crackling problem. But any crackling, again, that's like the bathroom thing. I'm like, oh, is there something on fire? I got to get up and deal with it.
That might be a problem for some people. There's kind of like a vinyl record crackle that goes on a lot on this record.
Yeah.
All you got to do is just keep in mind that nothing is completely on fire when you're listening to it. That'll put you to sleep, just knowing that.
It's maybe like smoldering, maybe.
Right. Just smoking.
This is another one that kind of gives me the hypnagogia. We haven't really talked about hypnagogia.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Hypnagogia is the kind of space in between waking and dreaming.
I love all that. The one that really leaps to mind the quickest, because it's palpable, and I remember the effect it had. I was doing a daytime nap, and I was on the beloved old couch that's now gone. And I need to do a proper cry about it later, because it was such a good way to go to sleep. And I remember I was just slipping into a dream where myself and a bunch of people are standing around going, "Turtles, turtles, turtles," and thrusting our hands in the air. And my phone started ringing. And as I was emerging from the dream, I had a big smile on my face, but I remember thinking, oh yeah, that makes sense, because one would smile in a situation like this. The vibe was very like, oh yeah, of course, kind of thing. And being pulled out of that was one of the most awful, rudest thing that's ever occurred to me.
Yeah, it's kind of a beautiful world to be in, that sort of in between sleep and dream. But between being awake and dreaming, it's kind
do you try to hang out there often? What's your relationship with hypnagogia, Drew?
I think I've heard that term and I forgot it, but I've been trying to figure out falling asleep on my back.
What do you mean figuring out?
Like, trying to sleep that way.
Yeah, like I pile like pillows on. I grip my face with like an intensity, like I'm like a madman.
Whoa.
And so. Like, I'm like, wouldn't it be nicer to fall asleep on my back? And I know I can do it. Like you're talking about, it's like I fall asleep on the couch if I'm taking a nap, or I'll wake up and I'll fall back asleep. And so, like, while I've been playing some of this music, actually, I'm like, I'll just lie here and listen to it. And I've entered that state, but I've not fallen asleep on my back yet intentionally, but where, like, stuff starts to get weird, or it's like, I'm kind of dreaming that middle zone. So it's nice to be there, but it's like a tease if you're not actually going to doze off.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that. I always get the same thing when I lay on my back. If I happen to like doze off while laying on my back, I do get like, it sort of feels pleasant, and then I get rudely awakened. I get that same feeling a lot. Yeah, I'm a side sleeper, so I would love to be able to sleep on my back.
Well, this one I could definitely see going to sleep to, even though this one was played at the office, to everyone's consternation. Last but not least, Boards of Canada, Boards of Canada.
Music Has the Right to Children.
Music Has the Right to Children, 1998. This is a record that I hold in very high regard. And frankly, it may not be a perfect going to sleep record. In fact, it's kind of got an unstoppably fountain-like, endless supply of ideas. So it may not be the right thing. It's kind of like going to sleep to old VHS tapes that were all recorded on EP speed. So they're all effed up because you tried to put too much on the tape. So the tracking knob is endlessly off and there's no way to fix it.
That's a very popular sound in the contemporary music world. It's a sound I'm asked to replicate a lot in my day job making TV music.
Right, to make it messed up sounding, right?
Yeah, specifically that VHS kind of warbly
Tell us
effect.
about the instruction you get. I'd be curious to hear that.
Well, a lot of times I'll get reference tracks for things and they'll be like, give us something like this, and there's a lot of this sort of VHS-y kind of bent, warped tape kind of. I think you've got a lot of millennials are now kind of becoming, entering like their 40s. And that was their thing when they were little, VHS tapes, right? Think about it at a certain age. So I think it's a nostalgic sound to a lot of people younger than myself.
I got to be honest. Wait, Drew, how old are you, man?
47.
47? I love that you're asking me. If you want, I'll go on the internet and find out how old
About
you are.
42.
And let
the
you
internet
know.
thinks I'm 42, so I don't know why, but I love it.
So when I was a kid, so I'm a filmmaker. So when I was a kid, I'd be watching movies constantly, but I had figured out the way to replicate them and double tape them. So that was a lot of fun. If you called me, I couldn't actually talk to you because I was taping the movie. I wasn't just watching it, so I couldn't pause it. And I knew that I couldn't tune out of the movie because if I missed one line, I could miss the whole movie. So that excluded me from having friends for quite some time.
I'm sure it was worth it.
It was actually. I taped everything because, I was taping so many movies. I taped everything on EP speed. So I basically wasted my whole time. The whole... There's no tapes.
They sounded cool like Boards of Canada, right?
Right. They sound, willfully cult-like. That's basically what I can say. But
you could sell those for conversion into sound effects
for trillions of dollars.
Sample those. You got them still? I'll take them.
I do. So this record is an A+. Not sure how you'll feel about it as far as using.
Yeah, this was my pick, and it's honestly a little bit more beat driven than I kind of remember it, but it's still pretty mellow. This is another one that maybe could be a good kind of come down album. And it's also, I think, probably at low volume. You could probably sleep to this. It has a little bit more beats going on than I do remember.
Yeah, this one I could see this as maybe sort of supplementing a plan to control your dreaming, to do lucid dreaming.
So if you you're the kind of person that falls asleep to memories or something, right? If you're thinking of kind of things that you're remembering, maybe this might be for you.
That's good thinking.
Boards of Canada in general really kind of trigger memories to me.
Mm-hmm. Your relationship with the night has become obviously a much more complex one. Do you find that your thoughts, your feelings about it have changed since the podcast?
Yeah, I find I'm just more and maybe being a parent is part of it too. It's like I'm more able to step outside of that and be like, hey, what else can I do to help you? So one part of me is like trying to be like a manager or whatever and be like, oh yeah, that sucks that you're losing your shit. So why don't we take a walk or So I think I learned that from the people that listen to the podcast. So like, this is what it was like for me. And a lot of times I'm like, I don't even have it so bad. I've heard from like your story. I hear from people coming back, soldiers dealing with PTSD, and it's like, holy crap! Like I'm lucky.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's also the thing about sharing your pain, and and we know this also about from going to meetings, is that your own pain is subsumed and swallowed up by the pain of the universe. Someone's always got a worse story. And you're not alone. You found that it helped you, and and your show helps me and many, many, many others like me. So we really can't thank you enough on a personal level, both for doing this show, but also, really it's like a public service. I'm sure it's also a dream come true for you, being able to support yourself off the back of just doing this.
Yeah. It's like really something, like you said, it's like it gives me purpose, and I feel lucky to do it. And it's endlessly, I think when we think about all this music, and it's like thus far the podcast has been endlessly creatively challenging in a way where I'm like, let's try this and see how it goes, or let's see what this puzzle is and try to put these puzzle pieces together and see what it looks like within the context of the show. There's rules, but it's like, I get to experiment within those rules, and I still find it fascinating to try to figure out what those are and still push what the limits are. And yeah, we'll see. I'm always like, how long can I ride this pony for?
Well, hopefully forever. It's a great show. Anyone out there in Discograffiti City, basically, you just got to check out Sleep With Me. It's an amazing podcast. Even if you, have no trouble getting to sleep, if you wake up in the middle of the night, that's a great way for, to use it. I use it that way. I also want to thank Joe Cravino for helping us with this. If it wasn't for Joe, this show would not be in existence. Joe Cravino, works on Discograffiti and is also a Patreon member of Sleep With Me, listens to it most nights to get to sleep, and he engineered the meeting of the minds here. So we just want to thank you, and Joe, we love you. Thank you so
Joe.
much. Yeah, he loves you in the most authentic definition of the word, as is humanly imaginable. I'm serious. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in.
And if you're still awake, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Then I'm going to speak louder to make sure you wake up, so we can say a goodbye proper.
Let's do the opposite. Let's take it down.
To Scoots. Scoots, thank you so much for joining. Now I feel like I'm doing like a late night love letters call-in.
Now you're like one of those Quiet Storm guys.
Right. Well, you know what to do. Definitely, follow us on every social media outlet imaginable. Give us 5 stars on the thing, and then follow us on Spotify, Apple, whatever you do.
Check out the new improved Discograffiti.com. We've made some upgrades over there. Site kind of loads faster. We got some socials happening in there. Let's beef that up a little bit.
That's right.
And definitely tell a friend.
Send out. It doesn't cost you a thing to send out episodes. So if you know somebody who's suffering from insomnia, send this out to them. If you know somebody who loves Pink Floyd, send the Pink Floyd episode out. You know how it works. You're doing a kindness, and you'll go to heaven. This has been proven. If you do good deeds, you'll go to heaven. It costs you nothing to do so.
So before we sign off, one last from the bottom of our hearts, sincere thank yous to Drew for joining us today.
Yes.
Really, this was so much fun having you here.
Thanks so much for having me on. It was great.
Drew, we love you, man, in the most authentic definition of that word, just like Joe Cravino. We will see you in the twilight reaches of the deep, dark night. And
we will soon return you to your regularly scheduled programming on
Discograffiti. Take it easy.